What's up, family? It is so good to see you. This is the Endangered Species Unapologetically podcast, your neighborhood barbershop that is full of news, politics, and informed conversations. You know how we do in the shop. We are forging a fair and just world by telling our own stories right here. My name is Devon Morris. I'm manning the last chair in the back of the room. So be like my play cousin. Come on in, play some games, talk your ish, and enjoy yourself. We got a chair coming up for you next. Welcome to episode number 7. Today, we're talking about the American myth and how we codify its meaning through the stories and the history that we portray in some kind of way. Now, the thing is, this is our official launch. It's like I want to do that snapping fingers thing, but anyway, you only know that if you know and live in color. But the idea is that this is our official launch, and with an official launch, it's time to start making this thing available to everyone. So this will be that kickoff podcast, or that 0 podcast or 1 podcast. It's just going to be number 7 for us. So we're officially getting ourselves out there. Now, that means if you know anyone that is interested in this topic, in this kind of material, please pass it on. We're going to make sure we do this weekly. So we're going to get this out to you every single week, same time, same place, just kind of get your week started off right. Okay? Now, so you know, my name is Devon Morris. You heard me in the introduction. Again, I am just guiding us on this journey and making sure I bring a few things to you. 1, the latest news. We're going to always talk about the latest news of what's happening. So if you see this thing 2-3 years from now, that may be outdated, but it probably still will be relevant. And then we're going to tell some stories, right? And then talk through some main topics, at least a topic of what we need to talk about during this particular podcast. So again, we're talking about the American myth. Now, so you know, I am, as you can see, an African American, but I like to call myself a native black. Now, why do I like to do that? You'll find out as we learn more and more about each other. But here's the deal. I'm a father. I am also an entrepreneur. And one of the things that I've learned over time, the biggest lesson that I got from Martin Luther King was that lesson that he said he felt like he's led black folks into a burning building. Great. Hear that. When did he die though? When his whole mindset moved from, hey, we're going to sing, we're going to fight for freedom, we're going to ask for what we want, but his mindset moved toward the poor people's movement, or basically economic inclusion. And one of the things that I am truly about in terms of this community, supporting other communities, is all about economic inclusion, making sure we have a place and we have the resources for us to move forward in a stronger way. Got to change that narrative that our world, in terms of how it looks financially, looks no different than once we was, I guess, released from slavery, emancipated, as many people would say. So the idea is that I'm just your guide on this journey, and we will kind of talk through these things every single week. So if you have some ideas, if you have some topics you'd like to discuss, let us know. Definitely let us know, because look, it's not just about me. It is also about you. And I want to make sure we cover things and get the right kind of guests, get the right kind of people involved with our show. So, and then I'm giving you what you need. The whole reason for doing this is that I want to have an informed conversation. That's it. I want to have an informed conversation. An informed conversation that leads to action. Not just talking to just be talking. I know in the barbershop we do a lot of talking to be talking sometimes, right? But the idea is that informed conversation to take informed action. So You'll hear me from a militant perspective, yes. You'll hear me from, kind of like a neutral perspective a lot because, again, I believe everybody got the right to whatever they got the right to, but if they infringe upon your rights, you got the right to protect yourself at a minimum. I'm not saying that we need to go out here and start killing folks. I'm not saying that black folks, or I'm trying to say that we're going to go out here and get a bunch of revenge. That's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. This is just an informed conversation. Now, I know some people will get offended, and I'm sorry if you get offended. I mean, I had a friend of mine, well, I won't say a friend, an associate that wrote me a letter on social media questioning some of the things that I was talking about. Well, he never listened to the podcast. So all he looked at was the title. And in looking at the title, he made some assumptions. But without listening, it's kind of like taking a snippet of not even what I said, something that I wrote, and then using that as the guideline for everything else. Well, I hope that people will listen to the conversation and hear all sides of the conversation. And I know that we will have people who may feel a little different, that we will interview from time to time, probably not a lot, but we will do things like that. But this informed conversation is for us to take action. That's what it's about. It's for us to take action. I'm not saying that we should go storm the government, right, and take people as hostages. No. Those other folks do those kind of things, right? I'm not talking about that. But we can have this conversation. And some of the most intellectual conversations that I've ever seen had that brings in a lot of perspectives have always been at the barbershop. So that's the reason why this was formed, for us to continue that conversation. I can't say build that conversation because I'm only standing on the shoulders of other people, right? Whether you want to call King or X or, go with Garvey, right? Baldwin, Pickham, Stokely, just tons of people that we all stand on the shoulders of. And we will continue to do that. And that's my whole purpose. I will be bringing things to you from many, many perspectives. A lot of things that I do is within the training arena, within coaching arena. So you may hear some things about that. But it really isn't about me, even though I'm guiding this. It's about the things we want to talk about. That's the main purpose. And in talking about the things we want to talk about, this will make this conversation a lot more fluid between us. So I'm looking forward to interacting with you. I'm looking forward to us growing together. Because just as much as you can learn from me, I can learn probably way more through you. I would say to you that I dedicate this to my mentor. My mentor died many years ago. His name is Abraham Lincoln Reynolds, third, right? And that was my guy. And one of the things is that I learned a lot of things from him, after getting in trouble and everything else. I learned a lot of things from my man. So, I stand on his shoulders, stand on many other shoulders, my family, everybody. So on that note, let's start having some conversations about some of the things that are in the news. We haven't processed anything in the past week or so, so I'm going to kind of bring us up to date. And probably the biggest thing that I can put out there right now for you is to get your butt out and vote, okay? Now, I don't have any issue with you not voting. I really don't. I do have an issue with you not taking advantage to try to change something. Now, the problem with the vote is that it doesn't, for a lot of us, it doesn't change our everyday lives. So, for example, somebody that's sitting there homeless on the street, whoever's president doesn't necessarily matter, okay? For most of our lives, it doesn't matter. A lot of the things that I've been doing recently is looking at local politics because I'm learning about the actual candidates locally, because I know that the impact goes from federal to more state to more local. And so I know my local politicians will have a much larger impact on my everyday life than the feds will. I also agree with many of you that the presidency is probably a figurehead that has been picked probably 8 years ago. Whoever's going to be president was probably picked 4 years ago, literally. So I think that with Hillary Clinton losing last go, they probably didn't expect that to happen. But again, Trump won, and they're going to put somebody in place that they want to put in. We'll see. Now, everybody got their opinions about everything, but here's the deal. Some of the stuff that's happened recently in terms of the actual, let's just say, Democrats, Republicans, COVID-19 would probably be the biggest part of most of the conversations that have happened recently in terms of the political sphere, at least nationally. The first thing, the presidential debate debacle. It was a problem. It was ridiculous. It's a shame when you turn on the presidential debate and all you could do is laugh so that you don't cry. Because I talked to some of my friends overseas, and boy, they do not understand like what's really going on. How could this even be allowed, or just what's happening in general? I would have loved to see Trump and Biden be able to give us more than what they gave us. Now, could I say that maybe one side of the aisle was a little bit more bullyish than the other? Yeah. Could I say that the other side was probably not as dominant as they can be? Look a little shook from time to time? Yeah. Could I say that the moderator wasn't the best moderator? Yeah, I can say all that. But the thing that it shows me is that when you have a situation like that occur, it was an hour plus waste of my time. Because the thing that I would have to say to you, even though we don't have a black political party, and I'm not talking about a black political party to put up any candidates, right? I'm talking about one to have some type of a set of demands. Like, look, here's the things that we will do that you need to do for us to vote for you. We don't have that, right? And so in not having that, like other folks have it, man, I don't think either one of these guys would be able to meet the demand. I don't think they would be able to, because I haven't heard anything from either side that helps me. The saving grace for Biden happens to be Kamala, right? Happens to be Kamala, right? So Vice President Harris, no, I won't say Vice President. Let me not go there. I want to say it. But anyway, Miss Harris, right? Senator Harris, she, her debate was much better, right? But she's a saving grace for, this whole Biden ticket. I would have loved to see Michelle Obama be on the ticket, but that's neither here nor there. So the idea, though, is that it was a debacle. The days after really turned into a mess, because it became known that Trump caught COVID-19. Now, here's the deal. Trump's going to get the best care regardless. But here's the problem. From what's been reported, and the thing is that I've done a slightly interesting experiment. I've jumped to watching more Fox News than CNN. So they just kind of polar opposites in terms of the way that they kind of present the news, right? With the actual tint, I just said tint, of how they want to sway the story, right? And so I've been doing a lot of Fox News, just kind of looking at it, right? And Chris Wallace was from Fox News. And so I was like, okay, I get it, no problem. And so looking at them, they weren't too happy with that debate either. My problem is I got nothing out of it. It was a complete waste of my hour and a half, 2 hours. But it's so hard when you know a train wreck is coming to not watch it. So hard. But it was such a train wreck. It was such a train wreck. I've never seen anything like that in my life. But the fact that he called COVID-19 came to the debate later, according to them, and decided not to take a test himself. Like his whole crew decided not to take a test. It's like, wow. What planet do you get on where you don't protect others? Like, if I was Biden, I wouldn't get on another stage with him unless it's proven that he's completely free of COVID. And the problem is that I don't know if his crew is. Even if he takes the test, I mean, he would have to take the test right then and there. And for me to know when he walks on stage, like he's exposed to nobody else before he gets on that stage, once he takes the test, I'd have to make sure of that. Because it's one of those things where he could have had COVID on the stage. Very well passed it to other people. When they had that whole announcing of the actual Supreme Court nominee. And several people at that event caught COVID. Now, could I say that was the event that was the super spreader? I don't know. You leave that up to the scientists, the experts that know this much better than me. But the idea is that a lot of people in the Republican camp have caught this, and they have fear that they could end up in a situation where they don't have enough people to vote for the upcoming nomination of Barrett, which starts today. Like, today is Columbus Day, Indigenous People Day. Today is that day where they are starting to have these nice little fights with each other, right? And so you're going to hear a lot about that. But excuse me. But you understand that debate, him catching COVID-19, him being in the hospital for a few days, and then taking a ride with the Secret Service. Now, no problem with you going to wave at people. But putting those people in a car at risk is a whole different thing. Because the car is super protected. I mean, obviously, you can be in that car that he rode in, and it obviously don't pull in the air. It's protected in a way against chemical attacks, right? Okay, great. You hear that. So that's another one of those, interesting things. But then you say to yourself, when he got out of the hospital, he did a Superman thing. He took the mask off like Superman. And taking the mask off like Superman, it was just that kind of show that ended up like, okay, what are you trying to prove? Is there something that you're truly trying to prove here? Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. He says he's not sick. He said he's immune. Recently he says immune to COVID. And then you have the scientists saying you could catch it again a second time. So what's the actual truth? What's the actual reality? I don't know, but I'm going to believe the scientists above anybody else. Always going to believe the scientists above anybody else. Biden didn't test. I mean, he tested negative for COVID, and that's a positive thing. And I wish no ill against anybody, no ill will against Trump either, because he won based on the system in place. Now, here's the deal. Interestingly enough, recently, the governor of Kentucky also caught COVID. He also caught COVID. The only reason why I bring that up is because Kentucky has been in the news with Breonna Taylor's case, right? The whole grand jury thing. And, the attorney general has been under fire. Why they've been under fire? Because a lot of the things that he said just didn't turn out to be truthful. Okay, so that's a problem. But it is Kentucky. It is what it is. But that grand jury process is definitely in question. Having silent grand juries is probably more in question than anything else. So it's one of those things where since COVID-19 has occurred, court systems in general have almost been on pause, because how do you operate anything with bodies of people, especially if you don't have the ability to test them or have a vaccine or anything like that? So you put a lot of people at risk. So court systems around the nation have been at a pause. Now, it's interesting because they're still fighting, in general, about a stimulus package. You got people struggling and they're fighting about a stimulus package. But then gonna make sure that they push the justice through. Gonna have those hearings, and they're probably gonna spend more time on these hearings than they actually spend making sure they bang out a stimulus package for Americans that are suffering right now. Well, that takes us to the confirmation hearings of Amy Coney Barrett, right? They actually begin today. Now, I was thinking about this, right? I was thinking hard about this. And I said to myself, the most interesting thing that could happen right now is if Senator Harris, was able to lead the questions that are being asked. Because the thing that you have to understand is that Kamala has cross-examined Jeff Sessions, Brett Kavanaugh, and William P. Barr. And to have her actually grill Amy Coney Barrett, Judge Barrett, would be absolutely amazing. Now, it would be amazing because she's been an attorney general. So she knows how to move forward with these situations. Not to mention she's been pretty strong in the past in terms of being involved with that particular committee. So when it comes to Kamala, I believe she would actually bring a lot of value, or at least another face to this whole thing, because everybody's making a statement. The Democrats are saying, we shouldn't push anybody through because it's an election year or during an election. The Republicans complained about this in 2016 when Obama did it. Obama did it in March of 2016. This is actually October 2016. Were we actively in an election during that time, or at least in that process? I would say so, yes. There's no question about that, because they start these things early with primaries and everything else. But is heavy in March? Probably not heavy. But the idea is, I understand where both sides are coming from. Do I think that the next president should choose the justice? Yeah. But I also think justice should have a term limit. I really, really do. Because I guarantee you that these other justices like Thomas, they're going to retire. They're not going to die. They're going to retire, right? And they're going to retire because it's going to allow them to pick their replacement. So it's just a different way of thinking. Now, since that election process has begun, should we allow the current president to actually pick them? Well, I think it's all based on if you control the Senate and the House. If you control the Senate and the House, you're going to move forward realistically based on that. So, don't know if she will get confirmed or not, but it is partially stacking the court. Now, with a stacked court, I understand. The Democrats have threatened to increase the numbers in terms of the court, like it's been done in the past, because it wasn't always 9. So there's a lot of political theater occurring right now. And the thing that I find the most interesting is that black folks don't seem to have a stake in it. Either way that it happens, it's a long-term effect that we are not looking at right now. If Miss Barrett, Judge Barrett, if she helps to repeal Roe versus Wade, that may not be so good for a lot of people. But also the fact is that they put most Planned Parenthoods in black neighborhoods. They just do. So is there some conspiracy here? I don't know. Okay. but understand how it looks. Now, you take it a little bit further than that. The vice presidential debate was interesting. Probably the most interesting thing about it was the fly that actually landed on Pence's head. So we're talking about Harris versus Pence. I said pimp. Pence, right? Because you got a lot of memes after that. SNL jumped in on it. Everybody jumped in on it, that whole fly. Because the moment I seen him, the fly go on his head, is the moment that was like, okay, you're not being truly honest here. Okay? It's interesting, and I would have to go back and take a look at some other past debates to feel what's rude and what's not rude. Because it's like Pence had this thing where he wouldn't stop talking. And I think I've seen that in past, so I think that's normal. I think that's very normal. However, the one thing that I would say to you that you would notice from a black mother, a black woman in general, is the various looks that Kamala Harris gave Pence based on the things he was saying. I mean, if you're looking at that debate, from my perspective, it was hilarious looking at her facial expressions because she looking like, you lied. If I could get over there and just choke you for a little bit and give you a whooping right now, I would, right? It was just a whole nother look. And she gave him a lot of different looks that was just like, dude, you in trouble right now. Like literally you in trouble. So I just sat back and I enjoyed the facial expressions. But again, I think that they had what I would have expected from a presidential debate, period. So that's a whole different problem, a whole different thing. Now, that being said, politics is what they are. I want you to go vote. I want you to go vote for many, many reasons. I want you to go vote not because you didn't have a right in the past or because people died for it. That's not it. I want you to go vote so you can have an impact on the future of the country. Okay? On the future of the country. That's really it. No other reason. For you to have some impact, some commitment into the political process, the process that we're kind of stuck in, because it's kind of like the debate is between whether this is democracy or republic, right? And I can't say that all people are equal, so I'm questioning at least have equal ability to have an impact. So I can't say that I feel like it's a democracy. I'm gonna have to research that a little bit and determine what my opinion is, because the idea is that the people that are winning the popular vote don't end up being in the presidency. So it's just one of those things where it's just a nice little battle. Now, that being said, I'm gonna leave that on the table because I want to talk about another topic because we got some other things that we need to cover. Very, very soon, next week, they're coming out with a movie on PBS called Driving While Black. Now, this is supposed to be a 2-hour film that is premiering October 13th. Now, why is this interesting? Think about the things that have happened. Philando Castile, got pulled over and minutes later ended up dead. Sandra Bland, again, got pulled over and then 24 to 48 hours later, ended up dead, okay? Driving While Black is a whole different thing. You look at comedians like Dave Chappelle. You look at other people in general, right? It's a whole thing. It's nothing new. I mean, when I left to go to Chicago and drive that 14-hour drive, I had to be prepared to go through these various states driving while black, and it's a whole thing. Because I remember my mentor telling me when we first got to Chicago, he got pulled over immediately because he was black. Had to pay them off, right? Because it was just corrupt back in the day, at least according to him. I remember driving from Chicago to Mississippi, from Mississippi to Denver. And I remember a cop following me for about 5 miles on the highway. which is a nice little amount of time. And the reason why he said he pulled me over is because he said when I was changing lanes, I got too close to a truck. Not that I didn't signal, not that I had any other problem, but he wanted to stop. He stopped me because I had drove too close to a truck. That's literally what he told me my offense was. And literally, I'm doing a speed limit. I got it on cruise control. I'm not having any problem because I know what it's like going through these different places, right? And that's the reason why he pulled me over. So, it's one of those things where you realize that no matter what, they can use any justification whatsoever to pull you over. And they have a tendency to pull us over a whole lot. A whole lot. A whole lot for what reason? Just because we're black. No question. Driving in the United States of America, having a car gives you certain freedoms. No question. Always has provided certain freedoms. But being black while driving a car, it's like, do I speed? Yeah, no question. I've sped before, right? No question. But I was looking at a guy from one of these major fashion houses, right? I don't know. I don't remember which one it was, right? But he was a vice president now. And he walked across the street. I guess he jaywalked, right? And police stopped him. And the shoes that he's carrying that he bought are shoes that he created for the company. It's not just driving while black. It's driving while anything. It's driving while anything. Driving while shopping while black can get you put in jail. Driving while black, walking while black, right? Applying for a job while black can get you in all kinds of trouble. It's one of those things where the usefulness of things like the Green Book back in the day, where black folks wasn't able to go to certain places, right? Because they wouldn't let us in certain hotels. I remember a story in my family of my grandfather having a heart attack on the road. And a white family actually took care of them, right? They ended up staying with them for months, right? So you have good stories that happen. But man, oh man, oh man, I can't name you them times that I'm pulled over for no reason. I remember I got pulled over and it was such a relief because it was a black cop. But that go bad too, right? So it's a thing. No question, it's a thing. Historically, when it comes to different fraternal organizations or sororities, like you think about the Prince Hall Masons, you think about the Divine Nine or any other fraternal organizations that are specifically around there for black folks, a lot of times we use these organizations to travel. Knowing you can go to a place and stay with a brother, or you have a problem along the way, you got brothers that can come help you out. So a lot of times these organizations have been used for us to travel. So driving while black is a thing. And it will be nice when I get the opportunity to see that. I'll let you know all about it. But it's one of those things where I would definitely say telling our stories is a good thing. There isn't too many people that don't know that while you're driving, you're black, you need to be prepared for things to go down. I had to put a camera in my car because I needed to be prepared for things to go down. So I can look inside, look outside the car. So then, I'm just covered, right? I may end up getting a second one just for the sake of it, right? Even riding my bicycle while black, I was wearing a GoPro. I may even decide to get a GoPro or some device to record what's happening in front of me and behind me. So it's one of those things where any activity, especially outside of your four walls, your house, your family, you could end up in a situation if you're black. And so it is a whole ton of these "this while black" that continually occurs. So I would say definitely support the movie, watch the movie. I don't know who the director is. I have not seen it. I don't know anything about it. I just heard it, and in hearing the trailer, black folks was talking about this problem. Not that other people were talking about it, because they don't really truly know the experience. So, and knowing historically what has happened in the past is just another one of those just quite interesting things. So again, driving while black or anything while black tends to lead us to having a little bit more troubles than most other people, okay? So that being said, that's good. That's another one of those pluses. So that's enough in terms of about the news. We will always have a segment where we cover some news, but I want to make sure we cover other topics as well, and it just not be about what's currently happening. So what I want to introduce you to is another segment, another thing that we do here. Don't know a specific title for it just yet, but the idea is an opportunity for us to tell our stories. And I want you, if you have a story that's worthy of being told, that you want people to know about, then write us, because I would love to interview you and tell your story. Now, I have a story that I want to talk to you about that happened to me back in the 90s. And it's when I was exposed to Willie Lynch. Now, you may not know who Willie Lynch is. You may know who Willie Lynch is. Regardless, there's a certain place where it became really popular, and really triggered during the Million Man March, in the 90s, right? That really triggered it, right? You see this in, there's a movie with Denzel Washington. I think it's called The Great Debaters. I think it is, where there's this debating group and he takes them all around to debate. So I think it's The Great Debaters. He brings up Willie Lynch, right? But I want to go ahead and present this story to you. And some of you have never heard of this story. But we will always have a segment to talk to a story. So make sure that you tell us your stories and let us present these stories to the rest of the world. So on that note, without further ado, let's begin the story. Finally, this is the last flight of stairs. I say under my breath, holding a heavy box of keepsakes raised close to my chest, creeping ever so slowly up a narrow, winding staircase. The air stands still, peppered with small creaks, and my short, steady breathing breaking the gentle silence. Halfway up the stairs, I missed a step and embarrassingly fell forward, using the box to break my fall, but spilling the box's content everywhere. A bigger mess than one can imagine. So I raised my arms in disgust and just took a seat in disbelief. After a moment with a noticeable sigh, I took a deep breath, noticing the scent of old grass and vanilla. As I placed my hand down on the stair step, a light crackle, almost a tear, catches my attention. So I raised my hand immediately and noticed a photo. Not just any picture. One of a freshman in college, and you can tell by looking at the background. I immediately grabbed the paper next to it, lowered my head to my index finger and my thumb on my jaw as I remember the title, The Making of a Slave. I take a moment and delve into the letter a little bit.
Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River, in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods of control of slaves.
See, I'm not just any old kid. I was raised in a crucible of the south side of Chicago. It was just a village of Southern folk who migrated here long before I was born with hope for better lives. Black on black love, black on black crime. It is all I know. If you ain't got a song or good with a ball, your ticket out of town is education. So I was the first to go to college. Well, the first thing I learned was that I didn't know anything about me. Remembering that this letter sparked a journey for me, so I read on.
Ancient Rome would envy us if my programs were implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of woods as crosses for standing human bodies along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion.
My heart goes out to the young man in the photo. Today, I know that that story is historically inaccurate. First of all, King James the Sixth or the First, whatever he is to you, died in 1625. Queen Anne was the current ruler of England. Overall, it does not reflect the linguistic patterns of colonial English speakers. However, I understand why he believes it, especially when you hear the minister, Louis Farrakhan, profess it to be true a few years later. I remember the weight and the emotions of living in a world that don't like you because you're black? But I digress.
I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing a valuable stock by hangings, you're having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed.
Not really a code switcher yet. I remember taking Rhetoric 101 where I had to maintain a journal. I wrote heartfelt classics like A Black Man Will Never Be President and about the fear of someone trying to kill me. Well, seeing the N-word in the school newspaper doesn't help, right? The young man is yet to know the pride of having the first black president, Barack Obama, being juxtaposed against a knee on the neck of George Floyd. So I read on.
Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method of controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseers can use it.
The evolution of the usage of the word black to describe the African diaspora in America did not happen until after the Civil Rights Movement. We're talking mid-late 1960s. The term African American rose in popularity in the 1980s. See, I recognize the lie. Just look up a few wills, auctions, or laws like the slave codes that occurred before the movement. As a genealogist, I have seen historical records from the 1700s use words like a slave, Negro, and mulatto. As I think about it, sitting here as a stair-step detective. So I read on.
I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them.
There is no such thing as capital S South. If I remember correctly, 1776 was the founding of the grand old United States of America. There weren't even 13 colonies yet. Georgia did not colonize until 1732. This is 1712. But let's get back to these differences.
On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, size of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slave lives in the valley, on hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action, but before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration.
See, I remember the feeling of being paralyzed by the power of one person that shaped an entire community of black folks. I mean, could this really be true? Do I have to rethink the playful nature of good and bad hair in Spike Lee's movie, School Days? See, today I know our community is no different than any other community, where small differences can be admired or frowned upon equally. Let's continue this journey.
The black slave, after receiving his indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use a female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us.
I remember being told the guy's name, a harbinger of racial terrorism never seen before. My visits to the South being characterized by warnings, with black folk keeping a close eye on me. See, I remember the faces of Emmett Till and justice not being served. You know she lied about it, right? You know they completely got off? Completely. Understand, according to the NAACP, from 1882 to 1968, there were 4,743 lynchings on record. A whopping, an astounding 72.7% of lynchings were black people. The crazy thing is that this speech or letter, whatever you want to call it, does not promote violence. But it's the name that sparks fear.
Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. Willie Lynch.
You see, I smile at the name, Willie Lynch, knowing that I will learn that we never stop fighting for our freedom. I mean, in 1712, there was a rebellion in New York City. think about today with the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests that are all about change occurring right now. Truth is, back then, I didn't know how to feel with a hurt heart. Now I balance that with knowledge and peace. Knowing this letter is a myth doesn't change the fact that we gotta do better. Oh, bro, you good? My brother says, just checking on me. I smile, tuck away the photo of me, and reply, yeah, I'm good. Thanks for helping me, man. Read this letter. Okay. Welcome back from the story. I hope that you enjoyed that story. It was interesting putting that story together because Willie Lynch is another one of those American myths. But it's an American myth that is different. Like a lot of American myths, it's other folks trying to get themselves as being a part of the history of America. Every time, it is quite known that we are a part of the history of America. It's just that in terms of the history of America that we have as Native Blacks, is associated with negativity. It's always associated with negativity. And this whole Willie Lynch thing is another one of those examples of something that is ultimately associated with us having a particular place or being a part of America's caste system. And it's one of those things where you should know it, you should be quite aware of it, because in the 90s, I didn't have the internet situation where you could go find and research and, learn about this stuff and, at least debunk it, right? And so it's an interesting story, and it's one of those things that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of, but it's not a true story. It isn't a true story. But I believed it was true in the 90s. I really did believe it was true until, maybe 10 years after. So that being said, make sure that we're telling our stories, people, okay? Now, let's take this a little bit further. The main topic I want to talk to you about is a huge topic. And it is founded in terms of the day. Now, many immigrants find ways to codify themselves inside of the American myth. And one majorly persecuted group, big part of being slaves early on were Italians, were probably Irish more than anybody else, right? But as Italians came over and the position of Irish started changing, Irish Americans were tortured. I mean, they were tortured, right? Now, would I say that they were tortured more than Black Americans? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So they created their underground networks and did the things that they needed to do. But they also attempted to codify themselves in this American myth. And they did that by rallying behind an Italian, Christopher Columbus. And in probably the 1920s, 1930s, somewhere around one of those wars, right? Either World War I or World War II, they actually pushed forward a whole lot for there to be ultimately a federal holiday. But let's talk and let's back it up with a little bit of history first, okay? Christopher Columbus. The myth is that he wanted to see if the world was round. At least that's what I learned in school. That's not true. That's not true, absolutely. He wasn't trying to see if the world was round. Most of the time when people come up with these different myths, the myth is not even close to what the reality is, right? A lot of people are driven by money more than anything else. Like the American Revolution, there's no question that the American Revolution, at least the Americans breaking away from the British, that was due to slavery. No question, right? It's no question. It wasn't due to them throwing the tea over the boat, right? It just wasn't, right? But that being said, we'll talk about that kind of stuff in the future. But it's not what you learned in school. And so Christopher Columbus was not trying to see if the world was round. Christopher Columbus was actually an amazing navigator. Did he get this thing right completely? Well, the idea is that, well, let's go with a little bit of history first, right? Back in the day, Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, okay? As he learned more about sailing in his young years, he heard that you could actually sail to the west. You can actually sail west to reach the spice markets. Okay? So his objective was really to sail westward to get to these spice markets faster. That's it. That was his whole objective. Now, why would you want to get to spice markets faster? Trade. Money. Main objective. Okay? Because spices was like gold. So, in terms of that, he had 3 countries that he presented this idea to, 3 European powers that completely rejected him. It was like, we're not interested. I don't know if they were not interested because of him, or they just weren't interested because it just wasn't the thing to do, right? But they didn't financially back him. But I do believe it was Spain that decided to financially back him. And so they decided to back him, and obviously they will reap the spoils of this, right? So it is clearly presented to us that in 1492, he actually founded the West, or found the West Indies, right? And so it's just like in terms of the Native Americans, their name being called Indian, when he was trying to go toward India, and he called him India, which is the whole reason why you got the title West Indies. And, the West Indies name has still stuck, right? Now, it is obvious that if you got people living on a piece of land, that you just can't discover it, right? Okay? That is super obvious. There's also mountains of proof that he wasn't the first European to make it here, to make it in the Americas, right? There's all kinds of proof that Leif Erikson, a Norse explorer, actually made it here probably 500 years before the birth of Christopher Columbus. But those are just people who you could document. I guarantee you that there were other people prior. I know that Africans were already exchanging. I know that people of darker skin already lived here, Africans, right? We know that because there's records of that exist prior to 1492. And so, but when it comes to a European, he wasn't the first European to make it to the Americas. He just wasn't, right? And there's probably some others that have that we don't have record of. But at least with Leif Erikson, he at least has some record that he made it. Now, here's the deal. It obviously wasn't Italian Americans that first started to make Christopher Columbus into a hero. He actually was turned into a myth by Protestant Americans. So they're the ones that have made him start making him into the myth that he ultimately would become. The reason why they did that is because they believed that he paved the way for a divinely sanctioned founding of the United States of America by European Christians. Ding, ding, ding. That's all it's really about. So realistically, the 1492 date is really associated with Christians making it here. That America is going to be founded as a Christian nation. That's the whole purpose behind them turning him to a myth. So it's Protestants that actually did that, not Italians. So to take that further and not going too far back, You go to 1784, King's College in New York decided to change the name of the college to Columbia. There's a Columbia in downtown Chicago. You see many, many schools that are named after him, okay? September 9th, 1791, Washington is going to be honored with a city. President Washington is going to be honored with a city. General Washington is going to be honored with a city. You know the name of that city. It's called Washington, D.C., because the federal district was named Columbia, which is the feminine form of Columbus. Now, you know that America classically thinks of it, this American experiment in a female tone, right? So you get all the eyes of justice, female. You look at the Statue of Liberty, female. Everything is female except if it's violent. If there's some violence associated with it, then it becomes male real quick. But the idea is really simple. That whole Columbus thing spread throughout just about every single European Christian country. Literally, there are 50 plus U.S. communities that carry the Columbus legacy in their names. Of this, 3 subnational jurisdictions. D.C. is just one of them. You have other ones in other countries. That's where you get the 3 from. There are 2 countries outside of the U.S. that are actually named after them. 7 counties in the U.S., 17 states have a city that is associated with Columbus in some kind of way. 17. There are a few that's international as well. So when you start thinking about this whole Columbus thing, it is spread due to Christianity. No. European Christianity. Because we're not talking about other places. We're talking about European Christianity. Okay? So in 1869, the first Columbus Day was in San Francisco. Now, around 1934 is where you get Congress kind of bringing up the idea of having an official Columbus Day, a federal holiday. And in 37, it was official October 12th picked. And then it got changed to be the second Monday of October. So that gives you the history and background, okay? But what is his truth? The truth is that Columbus was an opportunist, no question, purely an opportunist. Now, the thing that you have to understand that's really, really important, and you flip that. Columbus arriving to the Americas represents really, if you flip that script, the violent colonization of the Western Hemisphere. So now, again, it doesn't say we've discovered, it really is, in truth, the violent colonization of the Western Hemisphere. That's what him landing in America really represents. Now, people might disagree with that, but that's the truth. Forget how you feel about that colonization. That colonization was violent at best. Now, obviously he did things for Spain, so he became governor of Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic, that island that's the DR in Haiti. That's what that is, that old Hispaniola. Now, in him being government, the people there, I think the Taino, Taino, the Taino people, were enslaved, slaughtered, tortured, and there was a ton of sexual violence committed against them. But what did he do? He also converted many of them to be Christians. So now you get this whole thing where we're pushing the agenda. He's pushing the agenda of European Christianity. All this based on money. Because if there was no money involved, no resources involved, then they wouldn't have came. They wouldn't have had a need to come, right? You know that he was an opportunist because there's a story that I heard. And I first heard the story on YouTube from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I first heard the story from him. And he talked about how Columbus was running out of supplies. And half of his men actually left him because they were just starving, right? And so in 1504, he decided to utilize knowledge that he had against the natives. And what he said to them, he asked them to help him. They decided not to help him. But he said to them very specifically that his God was going to punish them. That there was going to be a rise. They was going to have to suffer from his wrath if they did not help. And the piece of information that he knew was that there was going to be a lunar eclipse. But not just any old lunar eclipse. This is going to be a lunar eclipse where things turn red. And so what happened is he knew the date that was going to happen on. He let them know that was going to happen as wrath from God, his God, for not taking care of him. Great, he did that. That day occurred. That scientific event actually happened. Obviously, natives felt like they were being tortured, and bam, they gave him everything that he needed. So what he did was he took a scientific fact, he took science and used science to take advantage of folks. So you know that he is truly an opportunist at best. Opportunist. So that just gives you a little idea. Now today, there have been over 30 Christopher Columbus statues removed in the United States of America. I mean, taken down in one way or another, okay? There are a lot of states that are moving toward Indigenous People Day. Indigenous people was kind of created like in the 1970s, and this is all about the celebration of Native American culture. That's what it boils down to. Now, there is this move to write more the truth of history, but not write it from one perspective, the perspective of the winner. Also write it from the other perspectives. Because one of the things that we're going to have to do is find a way to reconcile our past with our current, with current events that are happening right now. Because what we've done is we've taken Christopher Columbus and we've created a myth around him. The myth in the founding of America. The myth that leads into the founding of this country, which is all based on lies. So how do we change that narrative? How do we change that narrative? How do we take this story of the United States of America and we change it to where it's not just about myth, where it is about truth, and you hear all sides of the story, not just one side of the story? Great. That's interesting, right? Because this experiment is based off of, a lot of times, the myths on what we idolize America to be. But if this experiment, if it's going to last much longer, we're going to have to come to some hard, fast truths and deal with those hard, fast truths accordingly. It would be in your best interest, America, to do that. And why? Because then it's cordial at that point. And it's the nice thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. And sometimes you got to do things just for the sake of it being the right thing to do. Look, here's the deal. We're going to go ahead and close this thing out. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us on this particular podcast. Number 8 will be coming next week, and we'll be talking about the American Revolution. We'll be talking about the American Revolution and the myth behind that. On that note, I'm going to say thank you again, and I'll see you next week. And you'll get the chance to start your week out with us right here once again. See you then. Thanks for visiting the shop. You know there's absolutely no me without you. But before you walk out that door, make sure you visit us at Endangered Species Unapologetically.com. You will find ways to stay connected with us. Take a look at our show notes, other episodes, bonus material, as well as that merchandise that you know Hustle Man got over there in the corner. When you're ready to break those chains, we got some stuff there for you to make your life better. However, as the old folks would say, be safe out there, young blood. See you next week.